How you doing? My name is Robert Pruitt. This is Jamal Cyrus.
Hello.
We are part of Otabenga Jones and Associates. So we're artist collaborative out of Houston, Texas. You want to put an image up? We're gonna. So we mainly do performances and installations that sort of come out of this this desire for liberation that has existed in like black communities, I think, in the U.S. for many, many years. We primarily respond to how that desire manifested in the 60s and 70s and since. So, yeah, I think we sort of were born in that moment and come out of it and have lived through like the aftermath and of some of those events. I'm particularly thinking about like the riots and the marches and all those things and how they culminated in sort of our existence and our sort of outlook on the world. So yeah, and our projects kind of reflect, I think, that identity a little bit.
Yes, and we also want to just state how we come out of a tradition in terms of working in Houston of people who try to engage art or who try to manipulate art to do things outside of the traditional settings, right? Mm-hmm. So mm-hmm. people like, as Rick mentioned, Project Row House, people like Rick Lowe, right? And we really, he might have said this yesterday, but came up in that setting, right? And in many ways sought to do the same thing with our work, right? So
this is not us. This is NWA. It's a screen capture from a video.
Okay.
But
yeah, but this, I think this is an interesting image because, like, why would NWA be bursting through a Martin Luther King slogan? But like as Robert was talking about, some of the things which interest us again about this black liberatory desire, right? Starting in the 60s. I mean, this is a continuum, but starting in the 60s up to 90s has looked very different, right? Has morphed into many different things.
So the project we're going to talk about today is a project we did at the Menil Collection in Houston. The Menil is a museum there started by John and Dominique de Menil. Do you want to talk about them a little bit?
Well, two Houstonians who are major wealthy collectors. Although this thing wasn't really a comment on their wealth, how they got their money, but two individuals who started collecting artworks, mainly surrealist works from antiquities, modernist kind of modernist artworks. So we were invited to them to take a look into their archive and to see if we could come up with an exhibition that was in the tradition of, let's say, like, Andy Warhol did some things about raiding the icebox. Group Material did certain things about using the archive. Fred Wilson. These types of exhibitions that interact with the archive and trying to pull out new meanings.
So the Menil, the thing that's sort of interesting to me about it is when we were first approached to do it, we were sort of thinking about the Menil because of its surrealist collection, its pop art and like that kind of. We weren't super excited about it, but we were like, we knew they had a large archive because it was work that, though we may have had some sort of like creative artistic interest in it, I don't know if it necessarily had anything that we could like flip or manipulate. But we sort of wanted to see what else they had, and so we said, yeah, we'll do it, and we just kind of ended up with like over a year. We kind of
so over a year going through these various boxes and shelves of materials and finding a lot of things that really surprised us and a lot of things that we could use for our own, sometimes nefarious purposes, right? That were sometimes paintings, but that were sometimes, for instance, you'll see some strange things like a Diane Carroll lunchbox or like a Molotov cocktail,
So talk about so one of the things that interests me is that this is a museum, it's one of the, I think, one of the best museums in Houston, probably in the nation. But the Demonils themselves, they had done, and we found this out by going through the archives. I wasn't aware of this until we got in there. They spent a lot of time, I guess in the 70s, like the sort of Panther office we had in Houston and like a lot of the other radical movements, they were actually big supporters of. So they became this like relationship. So we were sort of in a position, like we were like, wow, this is great material, but it's still this museum. So there was this kind of, I don't know, back and forth. Like museums don't necessarily, encourage the same idea, worldview that we hold, thinking about, like yeah. So
well, and that was at least one of the things that we really tried to get out of it was, again, to use these types of materials as jump-off points to tell another story, right? And to tell a story of like 500 tongues, right? In that moving at various speeds. So multi-voice, right?
Yeah, we ended up mixing their archives with our much more valuable archives.
Stuff like 45 records or like stacks of papers we might have found in Third Ward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just stuff we had found around the neighborhood, but, we see value in it.
And that was one of the things too. We were wanting people to, because one thing that the museum does is to create value, right? And we wanted to use that, we wanted to play around with that for the people, not necessarily for us, because, but for the people who saw the exhibition and thinking about, well, I got that record, and why is it in the museum next to a Warhol painting?
So I guess we can maybe look at some more images. This is just us going through the installation. This is Michelle White. She was assistant curator.
Assistant curator.
And Franklin Sermons was the head curator, and they were the ones that kind of oversaw this project. No, you're fine. But the other thing that sort of happens, and this happens with a lot of the shows that we do, because we do kind of work with museums, and it puts us in a particular place. We have all this material. We found all these things. Wow, already? Let's just look at the classroom.
Okay.
So very quickly, in order to get over the hurdle of what do we do with this information when our sort of targeted audience doesn't really come to museums, we have to sort of force the situation a bit. So we created a classroom. We hung the work salon style. We created this classroom, and then we invited lecturers to come every other Saturday or so. And this was sort of based on the Saturday school program the Black Panthers did years ago.
That's one thing. So one thing about the classroom, and also in terms of the histories that we try to pull out of our work, is that education in certain communities has a very complicated and troubled history, right? So even to just the act of trying to learn how to read, or the act of trying to educate someone, or introduce new ideas, sometimes has really serious consequences, right? And we were trying to point to that, such as things with sandbags. Okay.
We want y'all to see everything.
Okay, Michael Jackson figures, as well as some West African sculptures there. Official authentic Black Star line stock certificate owned by the Menil. Was that Soledad Brother? They had a bunch of copies of that in their archive. The head is ours. Certain classroom involvement. Some of my speakers, Alvia Wardlaw. I'm sorry. This is Alvia Wardlaw, art historian from Houston. Scholar and John Biggers. It's a gentleman named Terry Atkins, professor at the University of Pennsylvania. People who dressed up for the opening.
He was dressed as Farrakhan.
And he was dressed as a Nation of Islam guy. Amiri Baraka was also there. So again, this idea of voice and the exhibition not really being in motion until voice was there and activated by voice. Thank you very much.